The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
The great Tom Boswell, so infuriated at watching Jayden Daniels run as much as he did on Sunday, has come out of retirement to sound off and sound a warning about what it means to run a quarterback as much as Washington did on Sunday. We will get to that. There's some baseball to talk about. If you're an Oriole fan, you're probably getting a little bit nervous now. Another bullpen disaster last night after Dean Kramer had pitched very well in Boston. We'll get to that. And Jimmy Fallon was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday with some really good stories, including the story of his favorite skit on The Tonight Show when he appeared with Mick Jagger probably about 10 years ago. A lot of fun stuff to get to today on a Thursday as we are entrenched now in the football season. Yes, baseball is moving on. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty of the division races and wild card spots and all that stuff. But unfortunately for the grand old game, they really have to take a back seat at this time of year. And even Tom Boswell, who is as great a baseball writer as we've ever had, not just in this town, but across the country. He is one of the legendary baseball guys, columnist for many years, started out with the Post doing high schools, eventually segued to covering the Baltimore Orioles and then all of baseball, and then a columnist for like the last, 30, 35 years of his career. But he did retire a couple of years ago, but he does occasionally come out and write, and he is now alarmed about what he saw on Sunday with Jayden Daniels running as much as he did. And this is Boz this morning in the Washington Post, where he writes, "Just how reckless is Washington coach Dan Quinn? Here comes the answer. How many times in their NFL careers do you think Cam Newton, Michael Vick, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Randall Cunningham, John Elway, Aaron Rodgers, and Steve Young, all great quarterbacks who are also thrilling and famously frequent runners, had 16 carries in a game?" Boz loves numbers. And baseball guys generally do, but he really loves numbers. So he looked at all of their careers and asked the question, how many times in their careers did they run 16 times in a game? He said once combined. All of them, only once did one of them run 16 times. Now, to be fair, we did see the Baltimore quarterback run 16 times as the season opened on Thursday night. So it has been done by a veteran this year. But he says of 1,487 games, including the playoffs, those guys ran only once. He writes, an offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, the seer who late in a 37-13 game had his rookie run off tackle twice, including a goal line collision where his helmet was blasted off for the second time. Do you guys really need to cut your margin of mockery that desperately? What Daniels was both assigned to do and allowed to do on Sunday in Tampa was, and here's his big takeaway line, coaching malfeasance. Boz has declared this coaching malfeasance on a fratricide scale. What? Fratricide. He says that's a new technical term for when you try to murder the franchise, such as when Mike Shanahan put RG3 back for the second half of the Seattle playoff game because he was determined to show the NFL. That is the Boz version of what happened there. He's talking about the playoff game after the 2012 season when RG3 was spectacular. What I've been told, and it's, been pretty much confirmed by people who were in the locker room at the time, not necessarily on the record, but they wanted to take him out of that game. It wasn't Mike Shanahan wanting to show off to the rest of the NFL. It was RG3 refusing to leave that game. So let's stop on the revisionist history here a little bit. But his point being is that RG3 was ruined by running as much as he did. Now he looks at Lamar Jackson and he says, yes, he seldom runs 16 times in a game. That's true. His career average is 10.2 carries per game. He's also gotten hurt plenty, which is also true. I mean, last year he did remain healthy, but the previous 2 years he missed the last 5 games of each season because of injury. So that is a warning for sure. Then he points out, Boswell does, that Daniels is willowy, 6'4", 210 pounds, probably shouldn't be carrying the ball any more than, and here's where we go old school, and here's where I'm gonna take Boz to task a little bit. He says, shouldn't be carrying the ball any more than 6'4", 212-pound Randall Cunningham, who averaged 4.8 carries a game. Cunningham played decades ago when players were smaller, and he carried the ball more than 12 times, only twice in his 16-year career. Yes, at the time, you had a unicorn, really, in Cunningham. There was nobody in the league who could throw it as far as he could and run as well as he could. And remember, he came on board during an era of what they call pocket passers. Guys who couldn't run as fast as I do, who were starring at quarterback. He came in 1986, and Ron Jaworski was the quarterback of the Eagles at that time. Jaworski wasn't necessarily slow, but he wasn't particularly fast. And Cunningham was a running quarterback that hadn't really been seen before in the NFL. Cam Newton was really the game changer, but he didn't come along till 2011. So when he points out that Cunningham didn't run much, well, yeah, but the encouragement there was to stay in the pocket and throw the football. He ran when he had the opportunity to do that, and he got hurt some too. That's, remember that. The 1991 season, when the Redskins pretty much ran away with everything, they lost 2 games that year, and one of them was a game against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving weekend, which was helped by a Hail Mary pass at the end of the first half. And the other one was at the end of the year where Joe Gibbs was resting everybody last game of the season. They lost to the Eagles. They lost 2 games. They ran through the playoffs, and they ran through the Super Bowl as they beat Buffalo. But the best team in that division, people forget, going into the season, the 91 season, the best team was thought to be Philadelphia. And Randall Cunningham hurt his knee in the opening game. Didn't play that season. And that was a big boost for Washington. But, the fact that Cunningham didn't run that much, it was more of the time that he was in the NFL, where quarterbacks running were considered to be, foolish. You didn't do that. And here's another thing that Boz that Boz doesn't point out here. When he says Cunningham decades ago when players were smaller. Yeah, players were smaller, but you could beat the hell out of the quarterback. Go to YouTube, watch games from the 80s and the early 90s. Look at the way quarterbacks were treated in those days. And also, the team that won the Super Bowl that year was with Mark Rippon, who probably couldn't even break a five flat in the 40. So there's that. Then he talks about, Boswell does, Dan Quinn's most self-incriminating comment after Sunday's loss was that Daniels got to fully express all the things that he has. Boz writes, "Oh, please. We don't want to hinder his self-expression just so for the first time in 50 years, Washington might have an NFL quarterback with a longer life expectancy than a car lease." Well, 50 years is a bit of an exaggeration. Joe Theismann went out. Well, okay, maybe it's been close to 40, but it's not 50 years. Okay. Then he writes about Daniels running in the middle of the field where he has developed this head first slide. But he says only in children's fiction is a sliding quarterback at midfield protected. Calling quarterback runs just for garbage time scoring or just to make Daniels feel good is irresponsible coaching. Around half of the 16 runs appeared to be called plays, not all in his improvised scrambles that Daniels even consider resetting the pocket behind the line of scrimmage. Every time Daniels rushes the ball a dozen times in the game, Boswell writes, in these early years of his career, it will be another defeat for the best possible development of his superb ability, and it will increase the chance that there will be no, quote, later years of his career. All right, let me play this. This was Dan Quinn yesterday at his news conference, asked about the frequency of Daniels running.
The great thing about him, I know you guys know this, it is our first game. And, he's going to be an exceptional player. There are choices when to go, when to not. You do have to grow and learn into those. And I am 100% certain that he will. But the other part of his game, there is legs, and when there's times to go and create a first down and get an explosive, it's there. But there's also some times to move outside the pocket, like we were talking about mobile quarterbacks. Now a whole nother play can begin. And so I think you'll see that part of our game come to life in the weeks ahead as well. Now really it's almost like a dual threat. It's the drop back, it's the outside the pocket, and then the running portion of it. So as a defensive coach, it creates a headache, one that I am more than happy to be a part of creating.
Yeah. So what he's saying is, I'm not going to tell him not to run. Okay, we may adjust some things here, but he is a running quarterback, and we have to allow him to do his thing. Now, there's one more thing I want to throw in here about the Boz column, and his own colleague, Sam Fortier, who covers the team along with Nikki Jabala for the Post, he took a look at the film from this game, or the tape, and he has some adjustments to what Boz says. He's not going to rip Boz, he's a colleague, but says about the 16 runs. You take out two of them. One was a kneel down before the end of the half. You remember that? They probably should have run some plays, but okay, they ran off the clock at the end. And the other one was that crazy play at the beginning of the game where they tried that swing pass that went out of bounds. That counts as a run, too. So it's really only 14 runs. Then you get the breakdown of the 14 runs. There were 7 scrambles. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of scrambles in a game. And it's a pass rush that was pretty well known throughout the league. The Tampa's one of the better teams doing that. It's his first game. You kind of understand that. Of the 14, he says 7 were design runs. 3 were zone read keepers. They're going to run a lot of that with him. 4 were short yardage plays. And short yardage runs, probably not the best idea. He did take 4 hits while running, 3 of them on design runs, and on one scramble, he had the helmet-to-helmet collision. That, by the way, set up the Brian Robinson touchdown, and also he was hit 2 times on sack. So the picture is not as bloody as Boswell paints it, but that's the feeling that is starting to creep in, and we'll see if there are adjustments against the Giants. But here's the thing about Daniels. You got to, as they say, you got to let the big dog eat, and you got to let the running quarterback run. And a lot of what he says about the decisions that he makes while he's on the field are based on instinct. And this was Daniels explaining that yesterday.
I'll just say based off the situation. Obviously, that's like situational things. You kind of just go from there. I can't really tell. It's like a instinctual thing, feel thing, like, hey, the time is up. Obviously, you don't want to get hit by 300-pound plus people. So, it's kind of just like that's kind of growing up my whole life, man. It's like just an instinct, like that time, that clock in your head is like, all right, it's time to go.
Yeah. He's been doing this for 5 years in college. Before that, in high school, he's 23 years old. He's not 19, and he's going to run. So if you're in the Boswell camp of, oh my God, don't let him run the middle, he's going to run. The key is, can he protect himself? Can he make good decisions? And as Dan Quinn said the other day as well, we'd like him to be a thrower first. In fact, I got the quote here. What did he say? He said, we'd love to see him remain a passer first, and I think it's going to come with more experience. 16 carries is not the model we're looking for. I do think we'll continue to grow in that spot, but it's certainly not something by design to have that many. So you heard the breakdown from what Fortier has, 7 design runs, 16 runs, 2 of them, one of them a kneel down, one of them a play that was bizarre where it was a swing pass that went out of bounds. And of the 7 design runs, he got hit bad on 4 of them. Okay, so we'll see how the adjustment goes. Meantime, Daniels running is not out of the norm in the NFL, particularly in Week 1. This was Tony and Mike yesterday on PTI.
Passing yards in the opening NFL week were the fewest of any opening week this century. On the other hand, rushing yards were the second highest this century. So, Wilbon, what conclusions might you draw from this, or is it too soon to draw any?
I guess we're looking for trends in the NFL season, Tony, and it is, of course, too early. I like this. I grew up in a place, the only city in the league where there's never been a quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards. I'm used to running the ball. I liked seeing that in Week 1. Do I trust that's going to continue? Not really. But Jeff Saturday said something to us yesterday that I really feel hits home. You have so many young quarterbacks. You have 7 starting quarterbacks Sunday in their first or second season. And they're not putting up 385 yards per game. They're not Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady in their primes.
Right.
And so, how long does that go on? And by the way, you could have 2 or 3 more rookie starters join that group by midseason.
Sure.
And so how long does that influence what we're talking about? So I think it's too early to tell, but I also think we're going to go back to status quo by Halloween.
Yeah, so I don't want to draw any conclusions from this. I'm going to quote you with your two favorite words, overblown and overstated.
Yeah.
And I think this may be one of those situations, because let's just say this week they double the amount of passing yards and they have the most in a whole century, all 24 years in a century, and then we will look stupid, as we often do. Defensive coordinators are paid to figure out and stop the offense. They look at teams that throw a lot, 35, 40 passes a game, and they come up with a scheme to stop it, and sometimes that works. Now, I'm going to agree with you that the absence of Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees passing quarterbacks may have an effect. There are a lot of running quarterbacks now that are in there, right? Kyler Murray's a running quarterback. Jalen Hurts a running quarterback. Lamar Jackson, obviously, a running quarterback. But I think that if teams run a lot, the defensive coordinator is going to come up with a scheme to stop that.
Yeah, and Tony, here's one other thing that's possible. You get these periods where the pendulum swings back, and maybe after all the rules changes, not just allow, but promoted offensive football, maybe it swings back now, and defensive coordinators have just, got people's numbers for a while, and then it goes back the other way.
I don't think anything is a trend in the first week.
No,
I think you wait 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. But only 2 quarterbacks, only Tua and Matthew Stafford went over 300.
That's kind of surprising.
17 went under 200, and your boy
let's not talk
went
about
over
that.
100, and mine rushed 16 yards.
Okay, but here's the question. Do you like what you saw Sunday?
Yes. I like all change, except in my life. I like to see things that I can talk about.
Glad you caught that. I was going to
not in my life. I like no change in my life.
No kidding. And I have to say, as I've gotten older, I'm more resistant to change as well. So this is how the NFL is played these days. And back to Boswell's original point and making the comparisons to Randall Cunningham running less than 5 times a game, it's a different game now. And the quarterback is protected. Keep in mind, when Randall Cunningham was running less than 5 times a game, they didn't have such thing as sliding. If you slid, they could still hit you. Now you give yourself up either forward or sliding, like a baseball slide, and they can't hit you. And if they do, it's a penalty. So, all this talk about, the players were smaller then, and, that's why you get away with it. No. You could cream the quarterback back in those days. And now things are different. So I would like to see Jayden Daniels run less. Obviously, what you hear from Dan Quinn is the coaching staff would like to see him run less, but you're not going to stop him as a runner. He is not going to be a pocket passer. That's not going to be his game, nor is it the game in the NFL these days. Steve Young says, and maybe this is hyperbole, but he says if Peyton Manning came along today, he would not be able to play. Tom Brady, if he came along today, would not be able to play. I think they'd figure out how to get on the field, but they wouldn't be the stars that they were in their time. No, possible. It's possible. It's a running man's game these days. You say it's a passing man's game. Now it's a running and passing man's game. Coming up, some college football. I have said that I think Deion Sanders will be gone from Colorado at the end of the season. Someone who's forgotten more about college football than I'll know agrees. We'll get to that next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So there was a 4-word answer from Mike Gundy, the Oklahoma State football coach, on Monday. And the 4 words were, he was very inexpensive. Now, years ago, that might have gotten a big chuckle. He was actually just being honest. Gundy asked about a linebacker who had a great game the previous week, linebacker Obi Ezigbo, who is a transfer from Division II Gannon University. And he was named Big 12 Newcomer of the Week. And Gundy said he was very inexpensive. Everybody knows these things are now true in college football, whether you're paying, $3 million in NIL money for Arch Manning at Texas, or whether it's paying whatever to get Obi Ezigbo. And Gundy went on to say the number of players we go after that are ready to play at this level, we can't afford. So he was a good buy and a really good quality young man. A good buy, remember that? And a quality young man who had had success, and his physical characteristics we can work with and develop. So that's why he ended up here, in my opinion. We saw some things we feel like we could develop into a good player at this level. It wasn't going to cost us the money we didn't have. Now, they're not poor. I mean, they've had some enormous contributions over the years. Oklahoma State is well set in money, but this is what college football and college basketball, for that matter, that's what it is. And sooner or later, as Dan Wolkin points out in his column in USA Today, there's going to have to be a salary cap here. He says we as fans are now left with misinformation and rumor about an athlete's value while being asked to fork over large sums of money to NIL collectives so the player pipeline keeps flowing. We don't know what these guys make, and if you're an alum, they're hitting you up for money for this pipeline of cash to go to the players. He's right. He says it'd be a little hard to understand. How much money do various schools have to spend? How is it getting allocated within a team? What do bidding wars for recruits actually look like? Instead of spreading some flowery and made-up story about how much Ezigbo loved the campus in Stillwater, laying out the reality of the situation here was plenty good enough for Gundy, while also giving Oklahoma State fans a sense of how he and his staff are having to go about their jobs in this complicated ecosystem. Yeah, which is going to lead us to a salary cap. And as I've said, I think the biggest symbol of where college football is right now was the story last year of Jayden Sanders, Deion's son, his Rolls Royce getting booted on the Colorado campus for unpaid parking tickets. A student's car getting booted on campus for unpaid tickets. That's an old story, but often it's a 10-year-old Corolla with the hubcaps off. No. So Rolls Royce booted on the campus for unpaid parking tickets. That's where we are in the money game. And nobody has ever played the money game better than Deion Sanders. You know, he was Neon Deion and walked around with the gold chain with the dollar sign and on the medallion, and supposedly pissed off Carlton Fisk when he came to the plate as a Yankee and drew a dollar sign in the dirt. You know, his game has been the money game, and he's played it very well at Colorado in terms of putting the program on the map. Now, remember, he won 4 games last year. He's 1-1 this year, just having had his doors blown off by a Nebraska team that struggled in recent years. Bruce Feldman is a college football insider for Fox. He was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and he said pretty much what I said at the beginning of the season, that he does not sound like he expects Deion Sanders to return for a 3rd season at Colorado next year.
This just feels like it's going in a really bad direction right now. And
why is that? Is it the stuff with the media? And
it's all sorts of stuff. It's just like, I feel like is Shedeur and Deion, are they on the team bus with them? It's all these little things that I don't know if they're little or not, and there's so many times where it feels like they're trying to put out little media fires. And I don't know if they're media fires or if they're team chemistry fires, who knows? But I think we'll know I think this team has enough frontline talent to win 8 games. They're also shaky enough on the offensive line and in some places where they could also only win 4 games. I don't think the margin for error is that great.
The way that happens is if Shedeur is hurt, right?
Well, that would be, yeah.
And the way that he gets hurt is because the line is shaky. Again, protecting him. Yeah. And getting maybe a balance in the game with a run game. And it's just like him throwing 50 times.
I think some of that is, but some of that is, a lot of that is on the head coach now. I mean, you have an O-line coach who's never been, he was a GA, but this is the first time where it's his room. That's a big challenge when you're trying to build an offensive line. It was horrible last year, and there's a lot of new guys in it. You're starting a talented but still a true freshman at one of the tackles. The right side of the offensive line looks really bad. Now, they played a good D-line at Nebraska last week. I think that D-line is better. They should be able to win the next 2 games. It's Colorado State, who gave them a good game last year.
Oh, my goodness gracious. That's where that was Shadesgate, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that it?
And then they have Baylor, who's struggling. But Dave Aranda is running the defense now. Dave Aranda is one of the sharpest defensive minds in all of football. You got to come out of those 2 games 3-1 if you're them, because if they're not, I think all these other things that kind of start to come to light, these little, again, I don't know if they're little or medium-sized little grease fires, but there's just a lot of stuff that successful teams don't have like that, I feel like. And again, some of it has become an us against the world vibe that I feel like is happening with CU and Deion. Look, and I'm a person who said before the season, I think they're going to win 8 games. I'm not checked out on it, because I do think the defense is better than it was last year, significantly better. I think Shedeur is a terrific quarterback, and I think they not only have Travis Hunter, I think Jimmy Horn Jr. is terrific, and they have 2 other receivers who are very good. It's just that the O-line's bad, and they don't do anything in the run game, and so eventually, how do you hold up in that? How do you play complementary football to support the other side of the ball? And they're also, they don't have great depth. And, again, it's fascinating to watch. But I think a lot of the people who were all in on Deion are getting some buyer's remorse of how it's working out right now.
If you're talking about, Matt Rule, we talked about before, the coach that just beat Colorado, and how it takes a couple years for him to get his program up and running, correct? Deion took over damn near a 0-win football team.
No,
right?
They were awful.
Correct. So, but I understand that when Deion says, we're coming, and people will then say, okay, the opposition was coming for you, and look at you, you've lost. And so I understand that the manner in which he conducts his post-game press conferences leads to people to say, not give him the time to build, right?
If I put you on the spot with this question,
okay,
I want to hear your answer.
Sure.
So if I said to you, give me a % chance that Deion Sanders will be the head coach of Colorado a year from now, keeping in mind that Shedeur is probably going to go in the draft, and I would guess would be a first-round pick. Travis Hunter likely would go in the draft and also be a very high pick.
I think Travis Hunter might be a top 5 pick.
Oh, he's phenomenal
in the NFL.
He's phenomenal.
That's for real.
And Shedeur is really good.
Yeah, he is.
And
so you're saying that Deion just took the Colorado job to get his kid drafted?
No, I'm saying 2 years. I'm asking you, how certain are you that you think when those guys leave, Deion's still going to be the head coach at CU?
Listen, I love the guy, and just like everybody else that I love, I can't get in his head. I can't get in anybody's head like that.
But do you think?
I would say he's going to be there. Yeah.
You think there's a more than 50% chance?
Yeah, because the guy loves to coach. He loves to coach. He loves to fish. I think he does dig it up there.
I think it's going to be way harder for him.
Why do you think he'd want to tap out?
I don't know if it's tapping out.
Definitely would be tapping out.
I think the job will be way harder when you do not have Shedeur and Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn Jr. I think without those guys, I feel like that program feels like it could be a 2-win.
But nobody ever thought that Deion could get Travis Hunter. Remember that was the eyebrow raiser of the day when he's like, yeah, guess who I got from my alma mater too. And so why can't he do it again?
It's possible. I mean, look, you could say, hey, I see you as the next Travis, and you can sell that. I mean, he's actually shown that. You can say, he's raised a first round, I think. I think he'll be a first round quarterback. And so you can sell that. But I just think, to me, unlike most programs, the gap between the top players and their roster and what's behind them is profound.
And therein lies the rub. Because in college football, you're building the program. The roster doesn't have 53. It's got 100. And you always got people in the pipeline ready to go when players go down. So, for example, Shiloh Sanders, who's Deion's other son, Shedeur is the quarterback's son. He's the other son, plays in the secondary. He's out for a couple of weeks with a broken arm. Who knows what his replacement is going to look like? Plus, Deion has always been big on bringing in the splashy names, and he got Travis Hunter not first to Colorado. He brought him to Jackson State first, with the promise he could play both ways. Other coaches weren't willing to do that. Can he find another guy like that? Yeah, but again, what Bruce Feldman is telling you is there's not much depth there, and that's college football. It's like, Steve Spurrier, when he coached at Florida, he didn't have one or two good wide receivers. He had like 10. And when one would go down, he'd have somebody else to step in. His quarterbacks, they didn't turn out to be good NFL quarterbacks, but they fit what he wanted to do. Yeah, Deion, he's big with the splashy names, and he's big with putting himself out there. But when you build a program, you got to be just as interested in what you're doing with the offensive and defensive line, and that's not as sexy. And that doesn't get Deion the attention that he craves and actually used to put that program on the map. There's no question about that. He deserves credit for that. But do you see Deion as a football genius working, round the clock to look at the intricacies of his roster? Plus, they had some players on the team. Yeah, they were terrible when he took over, but he told them all to get lost. Why didn't he weed through a few of them and see if they were any good, and especially, players who don't get the limelight, offensive and defensive linemen. And then he chased a lot of those guys away after year one, guys that he brought in. So I'm totally with Feldman on this. Rich has worked with Deion on TV, likes him, probably isn't going to be in any way critical of him. But I think Bruce Feldman is spot on, and I think we are seeing the end of the Deion Sanders 2-year splashy experiment in Colorado. He will be someplace else next year, and you never know. If the Cowboys stink it up this year, he and Jerry could be reunited in Dallas. So, that the first 3 players taken in the NFL draft were quarterbacks. Caleb Williams to Chicago, Jayden Daniels here to Washington, Drake May to New England. The 4th player taken in the draft was Marvin Harrison, who was absolutely spectacular at Ohio State. Marvin Harrison Jr., by the way, his father, of course, a great receiver with the Indianapolis Colts. Made his debut on Sunday, and kind of a dud. He was on the field for 54 snaps, ran 33 routes, and was targeted by quarterback Kyler Murray just 3 times. Finished the game with 1 catch for 4 yards. Arizona lost to Buffalo 34-28 after building a big lead. Murray was more interested in looking at other players on the team. He targeted tight end Trey McBride 9 times and receiver Greg Dortch 8 times. Harrison didn't get that many looks, and Murray didn't see a wide-open Harrison going down the field for a potential game-tying touchdown in the final minutes of Sunday's loss. Usually in a situation like this, veteran quarterback now in Kyler Murray would say something like, "That's on me. He's a great player. We drafted him number 4 overall. I got to find him. I got to get him the ball." No. When asked about this at yesterday's news conference, this is what Kyler Murray said about Sunday's game and the lack of targets for his highly drafted wide receiver.
Honestly, man, I wouldn't say they were just taking him away. I think, I'm just, as a quarterback, obviously you're going through your reads. Sometimes the ball goes to him, but that's not, it's not my job. Obviously, I have a sense and a feel for guys when they don't get the ball and when they're, when they are getting the ball. But, I leave that up to Drew. Drew always, he tells me don't worry about that type of stuff. Just keep playing your game and, get the ball to where the ball's supposed to go.
Okay, so not on me. It's the offensive coordinator. Yeah, you got to find this guy. You got to get the ball in his hands. He's big. He's fast. You got to get the ball to him. Drew Pensick is the Cardinals offensive coordinator. He actually, backed his quarterback. He says, one of the things I really try to stress with Kyler, it's not his job to get certain people the ball or worry about how a guy is doing in the flow of the game. I got to do that in the way I call the game. He's got to make the best decisions based on the look, coverage, and the way the routes are run. A lot of the passes called with Harrison early in the thought process, yes. So we'll see what happens when they face the Rams in week 2. But already a little bit of friction there, a little bit of something there that keep an eye on, because they picked Kyler Murray or number one. They've stuck with him, even though it looked like at times they were going to tank and dump him, And now they're getting him more weapons, thinking, okay, if he has that, he's going to be better. Well, take a receiver number 4 overall. You expect more production from him. I know it's his first game, and wide receivers do take longer to develop. You look at some of the great ones; they weren't as great in the first year. 1 catch for 4 yards. That should not be in the game plan. You may have heard that Maryland and Virginia are going to have a home-and-home basketball rivalry, 4 games over 4 years, starting in the 2025-26 season, so it won't happen this year, but they get started in Charlottesville next year, and that will continue back and forth through 2028, 2029. And this is, there's been some big games between the two of them over the years when they were both in the ACC, though it didn't really seem like it was necessarily a battle for the top. It was much more with Duke, North Carolina. Those were the two, real, I think, big rivalries for them over the years. But Virginia had some good teams from time to time, and I remember the year that they won the ACC championship, the tournament. They essentially got in by beating Virginia in the last game of the year. I was at that game. Gary Williams almost jumped out of his suit after the game. But they met 184 times. They did play in 2018 as part of the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and Maryland leads the all-time series 108-76. I was just thinking about this, and I don't think it would happen, but it would be good for Maryland if they could make it happen. You probably couldn't get Duke to agree to this, but with Mike Krzyzewski no longer coaching, would you even approach it? Would you think about approaching Duke with a home and home? Maybe just for 2 years? I think it'd be great. It'd be tremendous. And Duke doesn't need it, so Duke might turn it down. But Duke coming back into the Xfinity Center to play? Oh, my God. That would be huge. That would be huge. So I would at least, if I were Kevin Willard, I'd make the phone call because I think that would be just great for Maryland. They're also, they're going to do next season, they're going to have starting a home and home with Georgetown, which I think is good. You should play Georgetown every year. But, man, if they could reignite something with Duke now that Mike Krzyzewski is no longer coaching, that would be great. That would be tremendous. You've probably followed the Chicago White Sox to some degree, that they have been absolutely miserable, and it looks like they're going to break what appeared to be an unbreakable record, the 62 Mets for futility. The Mets lost 120 games. Now, they didn't play 2 of them. 2 of them were rained out and not made up. They could have conceivably finished with 122 losses. The White Sox may get there and past that. They lost again last night, so they're 33-114 on the year. And Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the team, the 88 years old, he released a statement yesterday about his now 33-114 team. He says, everybody in this organization is extremely unhappy with the results of this season. That goes without saying. This year has been very painful for all, especially our fans. We did not arrive here overnight, and solutions won't happen overnight either. Going back to last year, we made difficult decisions and changes to begin building a foundation for future success. What has impressed me is how our players and staff have continued to work and bring a professional attitude to the ballpark every day, despite a historically difficult season. No one is happy with the results, but I commend the continued effort. I expect to have more to say at the end of the season. There's one thing about tanking. This is beyond belief tanking. Reinsdorf has drawn criticism, including for his decision last year to promote Chris Getz to general manager without conducting a single external interview for the position. One veteran talent evaluator told CBS Sports about the decision, the fan base should be up in arms. They have zero chance to be successful with these changes. That was before the season. I don't think he stopped short of saying historically bad, but they're on the way to being historically bad. And I think at some point, even though baseball doesn't have a salary cap, and the big thing about a salary cap is you also have a salary floor. So, yes, you're going to have terrible teams in the NFL every year, and occasionally you have a team that wins only 2 or 3 games, or like the Commanders 4 last year. That's going to happen. But there is a floor on what you have to spend. The White Sox don't have the floor because you don't have a salary cap. And, you do get the benefit of other teams spending past the cap with the luxury tax. So here's Jerry Reinsdorf collecting money from that and putting a team that's historically bad and completely embarrassing to the city of Chicago. And for him to put out a statement, that it was a difficult year, impressed with how the staff has continued to work and be professional. Nobody wants to hear that. People want to hear, this won't happen again. And we're going to spend some money to have a team that's more representative of the historical nature of the franchise. They did win the World Series, but that's been almost 20 years, 2005. Right now, they are a complete embarrassment, though they did beat the Orioles a couple of weeks ago. All right, coming up in the next hour, Dan Quinn on Facing the Giants. Also, a little fun stuff from Jimmy Fallon, who was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's Bram Weinstein coming up at 11 o'clock right here. It's the, hold on a second. It is the, why is this mouse not working here? Here we go. Oh, it's this one. Excuse me. So you've got a new studio here. Got to get used to a few things. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. I know we've had this discussion over the years with football. What's the difference between pain and injury? And the line has become, I think more defined over the years. Like it used to be, put some dirt on it, get back on the field, suck it up and play. And things have changed in that regard dramatically. Has it cut down on long-term injuries? Maybe. Is the game safer than it was before? I don't know. I mean, they would like you to believe that. But Mike Golick will have some thoughts on that coming up in this hour. Also, Jimmy Fallon. Lots of fun on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. He's got a golf event coming up on Friday night, tomorrow night, and he was on to promote that. So we'll get to that. And a lot more. Bram Weinstein now at 11 o'clock every day. Tony Kornheiser at 2 o'clock as we've done some lineup shuffling for the fall. So with these highly drafted quarterbacks, it's one thing if you draft a quarterback high and he's a bust. It's even worse if you draft a quarterback high, you're kind of sure but not 100% sure, and you give him a contract extension and he regresses. And it looks like that's the case with the quarterback coming here on Sunday. Now, Daniel Jones has played really well against Washington over the years. He really has. He's been surprisingly good. But the Commanders, especially in the Ron Rivera era, were bad against the Giants, 2-5-1 over those 4 years. And they got beat by the Italian quarterback last year, the guy who was a undrafted free agent rookie. Tommy Cutlets, Tommy DeVito is his name. They got beat by him. So now Daniel Jones is healthy, but it's been really, really bad for the Giants and really, really bad when he opened the season on Sunday at home against the Minnesota Vikings. They lost 26-8, and his numbers were abysmal. 22 of 42, 168 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. One of them was a pick six. And it got so bad that not only was he booed on the field, but a bunch of fans gathered outside the locker room to boo him as he was leaving the stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not fan. They're upset and frustrated, and we're frustrated too. So I understand that. I'm not easily offended. I understand. How it works, and no, I got to play better. We all got to play better.
It was so bad that the fans were heard yelling Danny Pennies, a dig on his Danny Dimes name. That went out, and then a couple of the teammates came to his defense. One of them tackle Jermaine Eleanor, calling it inhumane. I don't know if it's inhumane, but it kind of comes with the territory. And Jones said, "I feel like I've been doubted plenty for a long time, dealt with this at time and time again, and done a good job with it. I think my mental toughness is in a good spot. I'm not concerned about that." Well, we'll see. We'll see if he can be rattled by Washington's defense on Sunday. The thing about the Washington defense is it's bad. I mean, all this talk about all the running that Jayden Daniels did, the 16 carries. Let's not forget how bad the defense was. This defensive effort that they had was just horrible. And the secondary was in complete chaos, with now players blaming it on lack of communication. Well, a lot of that's coaching. And Joe Witt Jr. And we're going to hear from him today. This will be a very interesting news conference. The coordinators always talk on Thursday. Joe Witt Jr. came here as the secondary coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Came here fresh off being lit up in that playoff game by Green Bay. Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator, his boss, so he takes some blame on that too. But you would have thought that of all the positions on defense, that the ones that would be most buttoned up would be corner and safety. And it was anything but that. Baker Mayfield is good. He ain't that good. And he looked great on Sunday against them. So that's got to be shored up. And what you're hearing from the players is, oh, yeah, we understand what we did. We watched the tape. We know how to do adjustments and things. Well, we'll see. We'll see. The interesting that Washington, even as bad as the Giants were last week, Washington opened the week as a 3-point favorite for this game. It's now down to 1.5. Dan Quinn has spent some time in this division last couple of years, defensive coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys, has faced the Giants 4 times over that stretch, and looking now as the head coach for his first division game as coach of the Commanders.
There's a lot that goes into the division because you'll know both teams know each other better when you're playing the first game. Usually the the matchups, who's new, who's different, what's been the same and what will be played different. The second time, what new wrinkles can you expect? But I would say, man, like to be a part of this, what a cool honor. Like this is a strong division and has been for, a history of ball. So it's really cool to be a part of it. And so to have, be a part of this game, with Washington and New York, man, we're fired up. But the division, it's a really big deal. And we recognize that and talked about that today.
Yeah, strong since the history of ball, but not always that strong. Remember Ron Rivera's first year, they made the playoffs at 7-9. That's not to say that's going to happen this year. Philadelphia looks good, and Cleveland looked terrible in the opening week, so we really won't get a really good handle on the Cowboys for a couple of weeks. But, this will be his first division game, first test. As for Jayden Daniels, one of the cool things about this is that he gets to see his old teammate, Malik Neighbors, now a wide receiver with the Giants, and Daniels talking about it yesterday at his news conference.
It's going to be special. That's my brother. We built a very tight connection over these past 2 years at LSU. Communication, I talked to him last night, but I don't see us talking that much this whole week, so to the game. Mate, nah. We was kind of just chilling, man, just catching up, talking like how our first games went. And then, we kind of went from there. And obviously, we know it was at stake, bragging rights between me and him, But I don't know. Maybe we'll talk pregame. Maybe we're not. Maybe I'll see him after the game, so we'll see.
Well, you can bet on this. There'll be a jersey exchange. That's the thing. Thinking about the jersey exchange, which is now common in the NFL. You always get a picture of the two guys holding up each other's jerseys. I believe the players have to pay for them, so it's not like, the team has the big expense on it. But if you've ever been to the Hall of Fame in Canton, one of the things that's interesting to look at least for me, they have Otto Graham's jersey that he wore at the end of his career with the Cleveland Browns. And jersey numbers became more, well, lack of a better word, uniform as time went on. But when Otto Graham came into the NFL, he had played in the old All-American Conference with the Browns when they came in 1950, if I'm not mistaken. And he had signed with them like coming out of college, 46. So the All-American Conference had merged. This was before the AFL-NFL merger of 1970. This was 20 years before. And some of the teams that had survived from that league were merged into the NFL, and the Browns were one of them, and they picked up right where they left off. They continued to win championships. But if you look at Otto Graham's jersey, you'll see number 14 on it, which is what he wore. But he came in with 60. And if you can see where there's the faded outline of the 60, which they actually took off the jersey and sewed on number 14. Now they're like, disposables. And if you go into a Dick's or any of these, sporting order online fanatics, a real jersey is going to cost you like $150, maybe $200. But, with the money that these guys make, That's the way it works. So expect a jersey exchange on that. This was fun from yesterday. Mike Golick, who you used to hear here on ESPN 630, and I thought probably should have stayed with his son. They could have done a Golick and Golick morning show, but whatever. We now have another one on Sportsmanlike, which is, I think, the third different morning show that we've had. But Golick now does a podcast with his son that's on DraftKings, I believe, is sponsored by. And he makes appearances from time to time. He's on Dan Patrick yesterday. And, you know, with the way that injuries are handled these days, and we've had this, pop up this past week with Christian McCaffrey, we weren't told until just a couple hours before the game that he would be inactive. And meantime, his replacement, who had a big game on Monday night, said, oh, yeah, I knew about it on Friday. Well, if it was known that McCaffrey wasn't going to play on Monday night, that had to be in the injury report, and it wasn't. And it's all tied into how injuries are handled these days. So Golick yesterday on with Dan was asked the old question, a football question, hey, what's the difference between pain and injury?
It's a gray area, man. It's a gray area. It was a gray area to me. Because I was a 10th rounder who started maybe half my career and felt if I left the field, I may not get back on the field. So players are in different positions. For the most part, players are tough and will want to work through. Now, what has helped is I was pretty much the one to make the decision on whether I wanted to play, whether I wanted to take the needle, take the pill, of which I did many, many times to play. Now, you hear coaches say it's the doctor's decision. If the doctor says no, then it's no. We could talk our doctors into letting us play as long as it wasn't too detrimental or blown ACL or something like that. But we could talk the doctors into a shot or letting us play. Now you can't. Now it's a little more difficult to do that, and you'll kind of have your helmet taken away from you, which in all honesty is a good thing.
What is that like? How long does it take? You get the shot to then you feel the numbness or you don't feel anything?
Oh, I mean, there was a year, my year in Miami, I got the cartilage torn in my ribs, between my ribs in game one. I got shot up before the game and at halftime for most of the season. And listen, you could have hit me with a baseball bat and I wasn't going to feel a thing. And I've had that shot up, my shoulder shot up, my heel shot up. I mean, I've had a lot of things. And I'm not saying this to say I was this tough guy. I'm saying this as this is what was done when I played. I mean, there was a needle going into somebody all the time, and people can think about it, what they want to think about it. They said, well, didn't you think about what you were going to be like at 50? I said, I thought about playing on that Sunday, and that was it. Again, players are smarter today and take care of their bodies better today. Don't get me wrong. The shots, though, worked. They numbed the pain, but, man, when it wore off, whether it was on the plane ride home or in a home game when I went home and went to bed, you definitely felt it. That's when the pain pills kicked in, and that's when, it could lead to opioid problems for players. It wasn't pretty, Dan. It wasn't a pretty way to go about your business.
And that is Golick talking about his time in the NFL in the 1980s and 1990s. This is what surprises me in 2024. This story from Green Bay, that Matt LaFleur, the coach of the Packers, not ruling out the possibility that Jordan Love could play Sunday against the Colts. He was hurt in that Friday night game on that bad turf in Brazil, the game that was on Peacock last Friday night, the game they lost to the Eagles. And Love suffered what's called the left medial collateral ligament damage in his knee. That's the same injury, essentially, that Robert Griffin III had. I was told by an orthopedic surgeon that the injury that Griffin suffered, this was the 2012 season when he collided with Haloti Ngata, that's a minimum 4-week injury. That should be a minimum 4 weeks before you come back. And the story goes, and remember this well, Griffin did not practice that week after the Baltimore game. That was the game where Kirk Cousins came off the bench to replace Griffin, then played a couple of plays. Griffin limped back on the field, then finally had to limp off, and then Cousins led them to an overtime victory. The following week, they go to Cleveland. And again, RG3 not practicing all week. But before the game, he's running all over the field, trying to show the coaches, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. And what I was told was that he and Dan Snyder went to Mike Shanahan before the game and said, okay, we're ready to go. Let's start. And Shanahan said, I'm not going to put you in the game. He said, you haven't practiced all week. We got a game plan with Kirk. We're going to go with that. And he didn't like that. And Griffin sat in the stands with his dad, watched Cousins beat Cleveland, and they concluded that Mike Shanahan was trying to sabotage RG3's career so that he could play Kirk Cousins. And things were never the same after that. Griffin played the following week against the Eagles. He could barely run. Then he played against the Cowboys, and they won that game. That was the Sunday night game. And then he played against Seattle, and that's when he re-injured the knee in the first half, limped through the second half, and then blew out the knee late in the game. And I look at Jordan Love with what I believe is the same injury, medial collateral ligament damage. That's a minimum of a few weeks. And Matt LaFleur is talking about playing him on Sunday. Wow, maybe that's just to keep the Colts guessing. Maybe that's part of the picture there. I don't know. But he said that Love does not necessarily have to practice this week to be ready for Sunday's game. Wow. That would be a wow if he gets out there. Griffin at least sat out a week. This case, it wouldn't be, maybe it's an extra day, extra 2 days because they played on Friday night. But I just can't imagine that he gets out there. But if he does, that's what seemed to fly in the face of what Golick is just talking about there, that they play it safer. And especially a guy who's a franchise quarterback who just paid that kind of money. I think LaFleur may be just playing head games with the Colts here. I'd be shocked if Jordan Love is out on the field on Sunday. We'll see. Commanders back on the practice field today as they get ready to play the Giants on Sunday. It's really remarkable, the Giants' success in recent years. And, if you go back over the years, I'm just thinking like the years that they won the Super Bowl, which was 2007 and 2011, something like that. The 2 years that the Giants won where they beat the Patriots. In those years, at least one of them, Washington beat the Giants twice. One of those Super Bowl years. It was really, really bizarre how that happened. Other years, they've had some real stinkers against them. The way this game lines up, it's almost like if you take a peek into the future and you look at what has happened to Danny Dimes, that could be the nightmare scenario for Jayden Daniels. I don't think it's going to be the same thing, but he was considered to be a guy who was on the rise, and they put the money into him. And the late Dwayne Haskins said when he was drafted number 6 by the Giants, the league done messed up. One of the sad legacies of his story is he slipped down to 15 and was taken here, and things didn't work out. And ultimately, he died in an accident when he was playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I'll be interested to see what happens. We'll hear more from Dan Quinn today. I guess it's the coordinator day. Excuse me. So the coordinators will hear. I'm interested to hear what Joe Witt has to say about his defense, which was awful on Sunday and needs to have a bounce back performance this week. Anyway, that will do it for me. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.